The difference between then and now was the use of substitutions were primarily being based upon a three-dimensional concern. In other words, if I were to improvise substitutionally against an A7th in this particular position, as I discussed before, I use personally, through my own choice, I enjoy using a minor seventh, a perfect fifth higher, from the root being the name of the key center of the chord. So this being an A7th, my personal choice is an E minor seventh. If in that same position my choice had been a G flat seventh, coming from the parent form, to a G flat seventh here, G diminished, to G flat seventh. In that position, that area in a two-dimensional formation would be like this. So on and so forth. The nature of these forms that I have brought to your attention some time ago had a great deal to do with my substitutions in a three-dimensional context. In other words, when I say three-dimension, I'm thinking of one key center. In the case of the diminished chord being lowered from the third string in this particular position, from the B flat to an A, as so. Under this, my substitution for this at that particular point in time had a great deal to do with the perfect fifth higher to the key of E, which I've discussed in depth some time back, appearing as such in this particular position. So you can see that all of that is here. In the sense of how this is going to portray itself with regards to substitutions horizontally, as I've said a moment back, this form shall move in minor thirds as so. So too shall these forms as linear proportion look like this. What this brought to my attention was a solution to a perceptual problem with regards to defining one parental form against the other. What did they have to do with each other? In this particular case, the diminished chord was the primary form that caused all of these horizontal and vertical forms for me personally in the idiom that I was functioning in. So here we had this, this, and this. But none of these things contained for me at that particular point the augmented form, which was based upon pure majors and pure minors. And that, of course, also totally automatic in major thirds as opposed to minor thirds. This is what resulted separate from the analysis. In the case of an A7th, as I brought to your attention, my initial concern was E minor seventh. In doing it as so, this had nothing to do with an A7 sharp 5. It had nothing to do with an A7 flat 5. And the solution of this came about as such. The second inversion of A7th from the diminished chord here is the first on a 4-3-2-1 group. The second is here. this is where the solution can be found. In doing so, I have an A7th here. I can also see this as a polychord known as A major over G. When I raise the 5th, known as an A7 sharp 5, it's also viewable as an A augmented over G. Because of this, when I see this in the light of multiple substitutions, I now have this to think of. It initially came from the diminished chord with the B flat to A, A7th. By raising the 5th, A7 sharp 5. It sounded good to me in those years prior to having the ability to analyze this, to just play melodies against such changes as this that made a lot of sense to me in terms of personal fulfillment. And along that time, along those forms, I came to enjoy this particular substitution for that chord. A7 sharp 5, B flat minor 7th. But I didn't quite know what that had to do with the augmented form as a parental structure. There is the B flat minor. We have here an A augmented, an F augmented, a C sharp augmented over G. If I take the A augmented and raise the root 1/2 step higher, I now have B flat minor over G. B flat minor over G gives me the proportions of an E flat 9 without the root. Since I initially learned in the blues idiom with players such as Willis Jackson, Gene Emmons, Sonny Stitt in the earlier days, these particular forms fit the blues. When this enters into it, the same thing takes place. The only difference now is the resolution of the final note. So that if I were to play a B flat minor 7th chord as such, and play this line for you, you'll hear it as so. The only difference in this change coming up is the last note. So now I have a B flat minor 7th against A, 7th sharp 5. That also should be seen as coming not only from the E flat 7th, which is the B flat minor, a perfect 5th higher, as opposed to a B flat minor as the augmented transformation of one note, one step higher, a minor 2nd higher, as opposed to a perfect 5th. So in one I had B flat minor for E flat 7th, in the other I have B flat minor for A 7th. This comes about as so. If I take the E flat 7th with the E flat 9 and lower the 5th, the sharp 5, to a perfect 5th, I now have this, which is the diminished chord, which initially came from the augmented form as well. So now there is a marriage between the two parental forms, and there is a balance, a natural balance between this form of perception in controlling these forms. So now I can think of this with regards to the pedal tone being A. Now I can think of G to G flat over A, C sharp to C over A, E to E flat over A, B flat to A over A. Now it's in 4 dimensions as opposed to 3 dimensions mentioned earlier. With regards to the dominant sevenths themselves, we have 4 of them in each diminished chord over the pedal tone. So the E flat seventh is going to be, or rather the G flat seventh will be here. And like before, I had G flat seventh giving me the perfect fifth higher, D flat minor seventh would be the substitution. If I then coordinate B flat minor seventh with the next multiple substitution, it will add this to the family. The next would be D flat to C over A, would give me G minor seventh. D flat seventh came from the G flat. So D flat minor seventh here over A. The chord that now shall be played is an A7 sharp 5, and the substitution that I'm going to demonstrate here is in one position as an E minor seventh. One more time. Again, A7 sharp 5, but now the substitution shall be B flat minor seventh. Now again an A7 sharp 5, the substitution shall be G minor seventh. Now the A7 sharp 5 shall be played again, and this time the substitution will be from the D flat minor seventh. Now let's see how we can, through motion of these forms, one flowing into another, multiple substitutions emerge on the same voicing at A7 sharp 5. Here I'm going to use 2 at a time to give you a demonstration to hear the harmonies and the melodies in these substitutions. A7 sharp 5. I now will play E minor seventh into G minor seventh. How about G minor seventh into E minor seventh? The next shall be D flat minor seventh, also with a B flat minor seventh against A7 sharp 5. One more time. Two different forms in the light of that. Now let's take another possibility, which could also be a B flat minor seventh into a G minor seventh. One more time. Before moving on to further extensions, including linear expressions and motion on the guitar as a matrix, I'd like to add to what we've been talking about so far a situation that occurs time and time again between musicians. There are 2 different opinions for what polychords may be called, and in many cases, with regards to a chord such as A7 sharp 5 being seen as A augmented over G in this particular string group, that for some musicians, especially in the case of pianists, these particular opinions consider it in this context that this is a triad, but the pedal tone is not a complete key center. with root third and fifth in it. So that a polychord in those cases are referred to as two different chordal keys. So when we are doing this, this is one way of looking at it, which is normally seen as with a slash. You'll see A augmented slash G. Or you might even see, in a case like a chord like this, a D minor 7 flat 5 can also be seen with a pedal tone as an E underneath, D minor 7 flat 5 slash E. Or it can also be seen without that pedal tone as F minor slash D. This is one way of seeing polychords referred to much along the lines idiomatically of hard bop. Now you can see how the A7 sharp 5 has 4 multiple substitutions. In this particular case being B flat minor 7th, E minor 7th, G minor 7th, and D flat minor 7th. Now let me bring to your attention the use of this in a different kind of way. What I will do is play those same substitutions, and now let's take the clusters themselves. Instead of only the A7 sharp 5, let's try some different proportions. Let's try the A7 sharp 5 with these multiple substitutions, first and foremost over the polychord called E flat 7th sharp 5. And in this particular case, the E flat 7 sharp 5 is like this over the A. One more time. One more time. One more time. One more time. In this particular case, what I've just played was the B flat minor 7th against it, a G minor 7th against it, a D flat minor 7th against it, and an E minor 7th against it. And now that's against the E flat 7 sharp 5 over A. Likewise, moving in a minor third, the same thing will occur again over a C 7th sharp 5 over A. And again over an A7 sharp 5 as it initially did to begin with. And the final addition would be the G flat 7 sharp 5 over A. With the same substitutions multiplied against these multiplications of the structure itself as an architectural structure. So now let's take it from the bottom, from the G flat 7 sharp 5, and move these in minor thirds as so. And in the case of the line forms that I am improvising through, I'm taking the substitution as a minor 7th, starting with a B flat minor 7th here, D flat minor 7th here, E minor 7th here, and G minor 7th here. That would be the horizontal display of this particular form of motion. And then we have the vertical tangents being in the same way, the B flat minor 7th here, the D flat minor 7th here, the E minor 7th here, and the G minor 7th here. So you see we have a vertical structure of all of these minor 7ths as multiple substitutions, as well as horizontal for any single type of those substitutions. And we'll get to that in a little while. The chord that shall be played against this time through shall be in this order: G flat 7 sharp 5 over A, A7 sharp 5 over A, C7 sharp 5 over A, and E flat 7 sharp 5 over A. And each time what I shall do is improvise over the substitutions multiply. Therefore you'll hear B flat minor 7th over G flat 7 sharp 5, D flat minor 7th, E minor 7th, and G minor 7th over the same chord. Then you'll hear the same multiples over A7 sharp 5 and so on and so on. And what I'll do is I'll call the name of the substitution that I'm using so that you can get an idea of the compatibility between the two. First, the chord is G flat 7 sharp 5 over A. I'll be playing in B flat minor. Now I'll play in D flat minor. Now I'll play in E minor. Now I'll play in G minor. A7 sharp 5 over A. B flat minor. D flat minor 7th. E minor 7th. G minor 7th. The next chord, C7 sharp 5 over A. B flat minor. D flat minor. minor. G minor. The next chord is E flat 7 sharp 5 over A. B flat minor. D flat minor. E minor. G minor. There are the four total forms, the 7 sharp 5, dominant 7 sharp 5, and the way they are being used is as polychords over the A as substitutions for each other, and also substitutions as the households of each of the substitutions that are being used as minor sevenths. Therefore, there is the house of G flat as a key center for the structural, the architecture of improvisation that's going to take place within that topic. So what I'm referring to as a house is a topic. In the case of the G flat 7 sharp 5, it looks like this is the house. The topic as a polychord is A. And the chord that is being taken from it, likewise, as I've described earlier, in coordination with two volumes on the same phenomenon known as creative force, we're dealing with these phenomena as well, over A. And what you're hearing is four named topics containing four named substitutions in multiple action, both vertically and horizontally. it's important to bring to your attention some things that were extremely helpful for me with my analysis of the fingerings, that in some areas of the guitar I came to find that activity became more comfortable due to the following revealings. Let's say I were to think of an A minor seventh in this area, to this area. Here, if I were to use this form, I find that each form that I have used so far in terms of my areas of activity and the line forms involved in that with the minor sevenths flow as follow. There's the beginning with the fourth finger, the beginning with the first finger. And by the same token, where you see at the beginning of the fourth finger, you'll also see it at a higher octave, the beginning of a first finger on a different string. So that here I begin low with the fourth finger and high with the first finger. Here I begin with the first finger low and high with the fourth finger. Here I begin with the first finger on the fourth string low and the fourth finger on the second string high. Here I begin with the first finger on the second string and the fourth finger on the fifth string low. So all of this continues, and this is what happens. And these are areas that lead me into more dexterity to fully take advantage of this. So that I have the entire neck of the guitar as one topic, with freedom to use any area of the guitar, with no specific area more comfortable than another. This series of forms is going to bring to your attention a freedom that is extremely rewarding. One of the ones that I incorporated and memorized was this one here. From C to C sharp, it now goes here. D is next, would be here. D sharp or E flat is here. E is here. F is here. And it goes like this. It then occurred to me, well, if that is in ascent, let me see how that would function in descent, if the same thing holds true. If all of this is right there under my fingers in such a short distance of range in terms of the frets. So here in descent, it occurred like this. C is here, the B is here, the B flat is right here, and this is the one I've chosen. I could have put it here. The A is here, A flat, G, G flat, F, E, E flat, D, D flat, C. So that caused this one to be memorized. And useful in conditions like this. Since it ends there, I can then couple that with a form such as this. Many things can be used for that. In many ways. So there are many possibilities with using forms like this, but before I get into sharing some of them with you, I'd like to point something else out to you visually about the guitar's fingerboard. The guitar is a matrix, unlike the piano being a horizontal mechanism that is moving either from left to the right or from right to left, other than the orchestral use of this particular tool, this mechanism. The guitar, not only does it have horizontal left and right, but it also has vertical up and down, or down to up. So let's talk about that in terms of a compass for that particular nature of this mechanism. If I were to choose to see my point of motion in this position under the terms of north being based upon tonal increase from lows to highs for ascent, being referred to as north, or from highs to lows being referred to as south, it would apply like this. If I were to take a line form that is in motion going south, it would sound like this. It's going from high to low. Anything going north would be like this. There I'm going from low to high. If I take a form like this, in terms of its proportions, I would then consider that west. If I were to take a form like that with regards to these motions going in this direction, I would then consider that east. If I were to take this application here, something else is taking place in this construction. I'm using all 6 strings in the form that is manifesting itself before you right now, and I'll call them out to you without repetition of them. Here we have the 5th, the 3rd, the 2nd, the 4th, the 1st, the 6th. The 3rd was repeated, and the entire thing begins again. So this is all 6 strings, and this particular form has another proportion to it, another form of control, and that's a pivot. The pivot is taking place like this, and I'll move it up here a major second to the 5th fret to demonstrate this accordingly. The pivot is with the 2nd finger, and there it is. That sets me up for the first thing to go down that just happened, and the entire thing repeats itself, creating a constant chromatic form in my description of it, moving to the east on the guitar for me in my position viewpoint. If I were to take the same thing and now consider it, since it is using all 6 strings, if I consider that as, instead of in motion like that, if I think about it as an ostinado, if I loop it without that pivot, this will occur. When that occurs as so, then I can begin to explain to you the use of the same fingerings for other string groups. In the case of a 6 to 5 as opposed to 6, including everything 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, as just demonstrated, the 6 to 5 would take the same fingerings that were seen here and place them here. So that this now becomes this. So those particular fingerings, I refer to these things as spatial fingerings because they came from spatial positions in this structure and were applied mechanically to this structure with no melodic concern whatsoever. In doing so, I then would advise you to take fingerings of the things that you are playing, the patterns that you already have absorbed, and begin to spread them into different various areas of the guitar with your ears neutral in the process, so that your ears are not judgmentally governing your choice of possibilities for improvisation, which has to be neutral at all times. So now we have 6-5, we have 5-4, we have 4-3, so on and so forth. Now let's take that and begin to pass from one to another, as so. And I'm going to take this moving north in a tonal ascent. If I were to move southward, it would appear as such and sound as such. If I were to then take it and incorporate into this motion the pivot that was used prior to the ostinato or the loop, this would occur then. As I said before, keep in mind that my perspective in terms of latitude and longitude is as so. This to me is west, this to me is east, this tonally is north, tonally descent is south. Therefore, the same form with the pivot included, if I were to play this as moving north in terms of pitch, ascending, and moving to this area of the guitar, which is the west, it would appear like this, with a pivot. And by the same token, keep in mind that that is in motion northwest. If I were to take the same pattern and perform it as southwest, it then would move like this. If I were to move that same pattern northeast, it would occur like this. If I were to move that same pattern southeast, it would occur like this. To expand upon what we've been talking about so far, along the lines of these particular directions with regards to longitude and latitude as on the guitar as a matrix, I I would then suggest for you to give some consideration to some automatic destinations, in other words, some pieces and parts that play their role in making it easier for both hands to be syncopated in such a way that you gain some dexterity while things are in motion at all times without having to think about placing your hand in a place that it cannot get to in time. A good example of that would be the use of the open strings. And along with these open strings, including the E to an A, the A to a D, the D to a G, G to B, and B to E, all of these are in perfect fourths. So now you can also include another highly automatic function that is very easy to play physically, which is the barred representation of the perfect fourth as well. That one goes like this. With the exception of the third and second strings, the fingering is always barred the same. Therefore, what was done like this is now done like this. So now when you use both of those together, you have this effect. Or which I personally think is kind of difficult to do solely as you've seen it done at this very moment, primarily because I add other automatic destination factors in this, other forms that are comfortable for me personally, such as the use of tritones like this. In this particular case, a very comfortable way of using this for me goes like this. Which sounds almost like whole tones. When I connect these tritones with open strings, you see they begin to move in different directions. Now let's consider the spatial fingerings that occurred from the use of this particular chromatic form, which came from multiple directions using multiple strings simultaneously. This one here is now to be added to the entourage. Here I've added a fourth factor, and this is the slur arpeggiated. In this case, a pure major triad, with the dominant seventh being the trigger point. So you see, these begin to take different shapes with regards to their improvisations in an extremely free method. Now the next thing is, how do these couple with chordal forms to give them a more melodic content? The substitutions I'm now going to play against this will contain not only the variable multiple substitutions coming from the parental form, being that diminished chord and the minor scales that come from it, or better yet, the minor melodies, which in many cases have been referred to as modal considerations. A good example is Jörg Hause in Germany had, as a musicologist, had outlined quite a number of my former solos on different albums, older albums, as Lydian forms and Mixolydian forms, and analyzed it as such as a musicologist. In this particular case, all of the minor forms that you're going to hear can be called modal types of terms, but I'm thinking of them generally just for a simple way of getting through all of this without getting into the intricacies of logic. So this chord is a D flat 7 sharp 5 sharp 9, and I'm going to call off the key centers of the general minor seventh chords that I'm going to solo through as line forms. D minor. minor 7th. A flat minor 7th. F minor 7th. That particular form is, as I brought to your attention, a D flat 7 sharp 5 sharp 9 over E. There are many things to bring to your attention at this point for you to consider and contemplate on with regards to available possibilities here with the use of auto destinations as resolution points. If I were to use any of these inversions of these substitutions, such as D minor 7th, B minor 7th, A flat minor 7th, or F minor 7th, there are open strings that can be used as resolutions, just as they were used with the spatial fingerings and the auto destinations such as these. If I'm thinking of, let's say, D minor 7th, and I begin to be freely explosive with the use, which takes courage, the use of these particular forms, the moment I'm here, I'm on A flat minor, on this particular inversion. But in terms of the resolution, I resolved that line on an open string, on an open E. I could therefore have done the same thing coming from an A flat minor, from this direction in the same position, and use the G open string to do the same thing, to give you dissonance in the shape of something that is dancing on the canvas known as consonants. So here we have a consonant cluster known as A flat minor 7th, which is extremely dissonant, let's say, as opposed to a cluster like this, which I won't even name at the moment, but the important thing is dissonance. So here I have this consonant, and there's the dissonance as a resolution, as opposed to the dissonance into consonants as a resolution. So these are things to consider as well. Any form of motion from any direction on the guitar can either resolve into or out of any of the forms that have been talked about. That concludes the first edition of Quantum Guitar, and I really look forward to seeing you again in Volume 2.